The Hidden Boss, a lesson in humility. It was exactly 9:30 in the morning in downtown Seattle, and a long line of luxury cars was parked outside the towering glass building of Skyline Tech Corporation. As the doors opened, sharply dressed employees in suits and ties stepped out, their faces glowing with ambition and the hunger for success. Among the busy crowd, a young man walked quietly toward the main gate. His name was Ryan Parker. He wore slightly wrinkled clothes, old worn-out shoes, and carried a faded backpack on his shoulder. To everyone around, he looked like just another low-level worker, someone invisible in the corporate rush. But Ryan wasn't ordinary. He was the true heir and future owner of Skyline Tech. After completing his studies abroad and working briefly with a major U.S. firm, he had recently returned to take charge of his late father's company. Yet before stepping into power, he wanted to know the truth, to see what kind of people worked for him. Who was honest? Who was arrogant? Who had forgotten basic humanity behind their titles? To find out, he disguised himself as a janitor. With a mop and cleaning cart in hand, he entered the building quietly. Almost immediately, he heard the sharp sound of heels clicking on the floor. A woman in a sleek dress and high heels approached. Her name was Melissa Grant, the company's assistant manager, known for her strictness and cold attitude toward lower staff. She eyed Ryan from head to toe and said curtly, "Why are you just standing there? Get to work. This isn't your break area." Ryan lowered his head. For a moment he felt a sting in his chest, but he stayed calm. He quietly picked up the mop and moved aside. As she walked away, Melissa smirked and said, "And don't be lazy like the old janitor. You won't last here long if you are." A few nearby employees chuckled under their breath. None realized that the man they were mocking would soon decide their futures. Ryan silently made a small mark on the floor with his mop, a promise to himself. He would endure, observe, and reveal the truth when the time was right. The cafeteria was buzzing during lunch. Some employees laughed loudly, others chatted over coffee. Ryan stayed in a corner, cleaning the floor, listening quietly. A few office workers looked at him and sneered. "Look at the new janitor, must be his first time in a real office." "Yeah," another added. "He probably doesn't even know how to use the elevator." Laughter filled the air, mixed with arrogance and cruelty. Ryan didn't look up. He just smiled faintly, memorizing every face. He knew these moments revealed true character. Later that week, Ryan befriended Victor, an older janitor who had been working there for over 15 years. Victor was humble, soft-spoken, and deeply honest, though often mocked by others for his simple clothes and quiet nature. One day, Ryan asked him, "Doesn't it hurt when people treat you badly?" Victor smiled and said, "Respect doesn't come from titles. If I do my work honestly, I can sleep peacefully at night. That's enough for me." Those words stayed with Ryan. He realized that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent and steady. A few days later, chaos erupted in the office. Money was reported missing from the company's cooperative fund. Whispers and accusations filled the air. Then Melissa stormed in furious. "I know who did it," she shouted. "It was Victor, the janitor." He was seen near the room. Victor froze. "Ma'am, I didn't do anything. I just placed the water jug there and left." But Melissa refused to listen. She scolded him publicly, humiliated him, and called HR to issue a warning. The room fell silent. No one dared to defend Victor. Everyone knew Melissa was close to the senior executives. Crossing her meant risking your job. That night, when everyone had gone home, Ryan quietly accessed the security room. He pulled up the camera footage from the day of the incident. On the screen, it was clear. Victor had only placed the jug and left. He never touched the cash box. Ryan copied the footage and whispered to himself, "It's time for the truth." The next morning, a black luxury car stopped at the front gate. A young man stepped out, wearing a crisp suit, polished shoes, and dark sunglasses. Everyone turned to look. It was Ryan, but this time in his true identity. The guards and employees were stunned. They couldn't believe the janitor they had ignored was actually the company's owner. Ryan walked confidently to the main conference hall, followed by his assistant carrying a file. A mandatory meeting had been called for everyone. Melissa, unaware of what was coming, walked up with a bright smile. "Welcome, sir." "I'm Melissa, the assistant manager. It's an honor to have you here." Ryan looked at her with a calm smile and said, "Thank you, Melissa, but I already know who you are." Her smile froze. Ryan nodded to his assistant, who played the CCTV footage on the big screen. The entire office watched in silence as the video showed Victor's innocence and Melissa's false accusation. When it ended, the room was still. Ryan spoke firmly. "Over the past few weeks, I worked here disguised as one of you, not to test your performance, but your humanity. I saw arrogance, cruelty, and dishonesty, but I also saw honesty and humility in people like Victor." Melissa's face turned pale. She had no words. Ryan called Victor forward. The old janitor hesitated, but Ryan smiled warmly and said, "Mr. Victor, from today you are promoted to logistics coordinator. This company needs people like you, honest, kind, and strong." Victor's eyes filled with tears. He thanked Ryan softly, overwhelmed with emotion. Then Ryan turned back to the employees. "From now on, this company will value people for their character, not their clothes, titles, or salaries. Those who lack integrity or respect for others don't belong here." Melissa was dismissed from the company. Later, Ryan met her privately and said, "Life doesn't end here. You can still change. Pride gives temporary power but takes away lasting respect. Here's a card. Our company runs a leadership ethics program. Join it if you truly want to start again." Melissa nodded, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she understood the cost of arrogance. The next day, everything at Skyline Tech felt different. Employees worked together with empathy and respect. They had learned that a person's worth isn't defined by money or status, but by kindness, honesty, and humility. Never look down on anyone. You never know who they really are, or what story they carry within. Weeks passed after the unforgettable morning when Ryan Parker revealed his true identity as the owner of Skyline Tech Corporation. The office that was once filled with arrogance and tension now carried a new energy, a sense of respect and teamwork. Employees smiled more. Senior managers spoke politely to janitors, security guards, and assistants. Ryan's experiment had not only changed the company's culture, it had changed hearts. But Ryan knew his journey wasn't complete yet. Leadership, he believed, wasn't about catching mistakes. It was about creating change that lasts. A new challenge. One afternoon, Ryan called a meeting with his senior staff. They gathered in the sleek conference hall overlooking the Seattle skyline. "We fixed the culture," Ryan said calmly, "but we need to grow, not just in profit, but in purpose." He announced a new initiative called Project Humanity, a program to support underprivileged workers, provide education scholarships, and help local communities. The employees were moved. But behind their applause, not everyone was happy. A few older executives used to old-school corporate politics whispered to each other. One of them, Richard Moore, a senior director, thought Ryan was being too soft. "This is business, not charity," Richard muttered under his breath. "If we focus on social causes, we'll lose our edge." Ryan overheard him, but stayed quiet. He had learned that some lessons couldn't be taught by words. They had to be shown. The return of Melissa. Meanwhile, Melissa Grant, the former assistant manager who had been fired, was struggling to rebuild her life. After months of rejection and guilt, she remembered Ryan's words. Pride gives temporary power but takes away lasting respect. One day, she called the number on the card Ryan had given her. The voice on the other end said warmly, "Welcome to the Leadership Ethics Program. Ms. Grant, we're glad you called." For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. Melissa threw herself into the program, volunteering at community centers, helping train young professionals, and learning how to lead with compassion. She was a completely different person now, humble, patient, and kind. Months later, she received a letter. It was from Ryan Parker. "Melissa, everyone deserves a second chance. If you're ready, come back to Skyline Tech. We need leaders who understand both failure and forgiveness." Tears rolled down her face. She couldn't believe it. The storm inside back at Skyline Tech, the company was expanding rapidly under Ryan's leadership. But one night, disaster struck. A major data breach hit the company's servers. Sensitive client information was at risk, and the news began spreading fast. Reporters gathered outside the building. Stock prices started to dip. The board was panicking. Some executives blamed the IT team. Others pointed fingers at Ryan's new policies. But Ryan stayed calm. He gathered everyone and said, "No blaming, no fear. We fix this together." It was Melissa, now working in the company's crisis management team, who uncovered the truth. The breach wasn't external, it was internal sabotage. Evidence pointed straight to Richard Moore, the very executive who had mocked Ryan's vision. He had been leaking information to a rival company for months, trying to prove Ryan's leadership weak. Ryan called an emergency meeting and confronted him publicly. "Richard," Ryan said firmly, "you taught me one thing. Not everyone who wears a suit carries integrity." Richard's face turned pale as the evidence played on the screen. He was dismissed on the spot and later investigated for corporate fraud. The power of forgiveness. After the chaos settled, Ryan addressed the employees. "In this world," he said, "we make mistakes, but what defines us is how we rise after them. Some of you stood silent when injustice happened. Some of you have grown. What matters now is that we never repeat the same mistakes." He turned to Melissa, who stood quietly in the crowd. "You fell once," he said, "but you rose stronger. You understood what true leadership means, humility." Then he surprised everyone by announcing, "Melissa will now lead Project Humanity, to make sure our company keeps its heart as it grows." The room filled with applause. Victor, the once forgotten janitor, now in a crisp blue uniform as logistics coordinator, smiled proudly. He knew the company had changed for good. A new legacy months later, Skyline Tech was named one of the most ethical and employee-friendly companies in America. Ryan stood on the rooftop of the building one evening, watching the sun set over Seattle. Victor joined him quietly. "You know," Victor said softly, "your father would be proud." Ryan smiled. "Maybe, but I'm prouder of what we've all become." The city lights shimmered below, reflecting a new chapter, not just for Skyline Tech, but for every person who had once been blind to kindness. Moral of the story: true leadership isn't about power, it's about empathy. True respect doesn't come from money, it comes from humility. And no one is ever too small to make a difference or too big to change. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about it. In a world that often values status over soul, remember, true success is built on kindness, integrity, and respect. Don't just watch stories like this, live them. Like this video if you believe humanity still matters. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that humility is the highest form of strength. And subscribe for more real, emotional stories that awaken the best in us. Because sometimes, the smallest person in the room carries the biggest heart.